Alright guys, so what we're going to be doing is building a PSL, but we're going to be doing it a bit differently. We're going to do it with a heavy barrel, and also we're going to be adding components from different models of rifles. So essentially when it's done, it's not going to really look anything like a PSL. It'll probably look more like an SVD to most people, although most people think the PSL looks like an SVD anyway. But anyway, so some of the parts we're going to be starting out with is an actual Romanian made PSL receiver. So started off with a good base. The hole's already drilled in this one, and we're going to have to see how well it lines up with our components. For our front trunnion, we're going to be using a front trunnion from a Romanian RPK as opposed to a PSL. One way you can tell it's from an RPK is because it has the markings on the trunnion, when a lot of PSLs, or I would say all of them as far as I know, don't have any markings at all on them. The RPK front trunnion and a PSL front trunnion are exactly identical. The only difference is that the bullet guide right in here is just a little bit longer on the RPK version, and that can be trimmed back just with a file. And in fact, if you look at factory PSL front trunnions, you can tell that that's what they did. That they just went in and swiped with a file until the magazines for the PSLs fit. So we have that. For a rear trunnion, we're going to be using an AKM rear trunnion. Now, AKM rear trunnions are wider than a PSL or an RPK because it's meant for a thinner walled receiver. But as you can see, maybe if you can see from here, this one has already been trimmed a little bit on the side so that it'll fit. It still needs a little bit more, in my opinion, but that's not difficult. We'll do that with no problem. For the barrel, we've got this honkin' dude here. This is a 1-inch diameter blank, and it's already been cut for the PSL extractor and chambered for 7.62x54R. That was done before I even got it, but this is going to need to be turned down to proper dimensions to fit our components. Crowned definitely, because the crown on this thing looks really gnarly, but it shouldn't be a big deal. Now, I do have a small bed South Bend lathe, so chucking this thing up, it's 26 inches. Chucking this thing up, it's going to be kind of a challenge because it'll have to go through the headstock, and I'll have to use an outboard spider. And the outboard spider that came with my lathe is not all that great, so I may have to make one before I do it. For the gas system, we're going to be using a gas block from a Yugoslavian or Serbian, however you want to say it. I'll probably use it interchangeably throughout. M76. The M76 is an 8mm sniper rifle, I guess you want to say, that has an adjustable gas regulator with a little cup that goes in, and it has 3 positions for gas. Now those can be opened up a little bit or even add one more. Depending on how this goes, I may actually even turn my own custom little cup, piston cup, with my own holes, but we'll see how it goes using just these factory sized holes to see if it'll function and run. So that's what we'll be using for the gas block. Now, since we'll be using that, there's some other components that go with it that we're going to need to modify. First, we're going to need to modify the PSL gas piston itself. So this is the PSL factory piston, and here is a factory M76 gas piston. As you can see, the head of the M76 gas piston is longer but more importantly, it has a cross-drilled hole that goes through both sides, plus a center drill hole that intersects with the cross-drilled holes. This is to help regulate the gas using this gas system. And so in order to use it for the PSL build, we're going to have to either modify the existing PSL piston, which you can see the differences here. Either modify this one by doing a cross drill in the gas ring and center drill to intersect that on the face and see if that works. I'm not 100%. I don't know if it will or not given the different lengths. But if that doesn't work, our next option will be to turn the head of the PSL piston down to the same diameter as the stem, and then we'll cut the head off the M76 piston, face it, drill it out so that it will press on over the PSL stem, and then we'll solder it in place, essentially making a long M76 gas piston. Because you can see it's definitely too short to use as is. Now, some people I'm sure are going to ask, well, why don't you just use the M76 piston, and since the barrel is a blank, just push the gas block back so it sits farther back? Yeah, that is an option if I wanted to use M76 furniture or M72 furniture, anything like that. But the problem with that is I'm going to be using SVD handguards. So these are actual Russian SVD handguards. This is what I want to use. And if I want to use these, I cannot use the M76 length gas system. It's too short. The gas block would be underneath the handguards and it won't fit. So using the PSL length, it's just long enough. The gas block will sit about here outside of it. So that's why I'm not going to use the M76 length. It would be a hell of a lot easier if I did, obviously, a lot less modifications to be done, but that's not what I want. So M76 handguard. On that note, with the M76, or I'm sorry, SVD handguard, on that note, to make it work with our PSL receiver, we have this DSM Labs handguard, rear handguard cap adapter. So this has a little raised area that will fit inside the receiver of the PSL, and that will allow the SVD handguards to be installed. It makes a nice transition from the handguard to the receiver. So that will take care of the rear portion of the handguard, how it mounts. Taking care of the front is going to be a bit more of an issue. So I have an actual Russian SVD front handguard cap. This is a Virgin one that I got from a distributor in Russia, and fits over the front. But as you can see, that hole is definitely not big enough for a heavy barrel PSL that we plan on doing. So my plan at this point, and I don't know if it's going to work or not, is to chuck this in the lathe holding here and turn down this rolled over crimp. So once that's turned off, this should come off the front, and it'll just leave the cap with two holes in it. And then I'll widen the hole to match the new profile of the barrel, and also widen the upper hole to match the gas tube. And so then that way it can slide it over and it'll fit onto the front cap. Now, since we're taking this off, we'll need a way to retain it. And I really, at this point, don't know how I'm going to do that exactly. What I'm thinking is taking another handguard retainer like this one from a Yugo M72, cutting off this flange here that goes over the original handguard, fitting it over the front since it has the wider opening, and then welding or soldering this onto the front of this cap. So then that, when it's mounted on here, we'll have that retainer with the lever on it. Then we'll make the notch in the barrel to use the lever, and that'll keep that all there. Again, don't know if that's going to work. Don't know how big of a pain in the ass it's going to be, but we are going to find out. So next with that, really going back to the gas system, we have the gas tubes. So this is the PSL gas tube. It looks different probably from one you have because I've already cut the handguard retainers off. Now this needs to be done in order for the gas tube to fit underneath the SVD handguards. These still aren't done. I'm going to turn this down to get this really cleaned up. This back end's pretty cleaned, but I'm still going to take a skim cut off of it to get these little raised bumps off. So that's the length of that one. And so another problem we're going to run into, or something that we need to address, is when you have your set position on your gas regulator for the M76 gas block, the gas tube is supposed to retain it so it doesn't turn while you're firing. Now the PSL gas tube doesn't have a provision for that. The M76 gas tube does. It has this little spring-loaded tab here. That goes in and sits on there. So when you want to adjust your gas regulator, you don't have to disassemble the rifle. You just take a little hook or something, or a bullet tip, stick it in there, lift it up, then you'll be able to turn to a new area, let it go, and the spring tab will sit down there and hold it. So the plan at this point is to drill out these little rivets on the top that are holding this spring-loaded retainer on. Take that off. Drill these matching holes in the bottom of the M76 gas tube into the PSL, notch it, place the spring-loaded tab on it, and then rivet it in place. Probably go in through the top with like a V-shaped pressing tool so that it'll press it into the flute of the gas tube to make sure it's really out of the way and it's not going to bind up the piston. Or I can go in with like a plinker's jig type thing, but I think since this is the method that they use, it's probably the easiest method, I would imagine. So we need to do that to this piston, or gas tube, I'm sorry, so that it can retain the gas regulator on the gas block. So now that we have that, for the front of the barrel, I'm going to be using an M76 flash hider. This is all single solid piece. The difference I'm going to be doing though with this is I plan on cutting off the flash hider tines from here forward. It's basically right there. And then this portion where they have these coarse threads, which would normally attach a specifically made suppressor for the M76, turn those off and then thread this section here 5/8 24 so that I can mount various modern day muzzle brakes, flash hiders, or even suppressors in that way. I'm not the first one to do this, and I basically stole the idea from a user on the AK files. I forgot his name, and I'll post it somewhere in here so he gets credit for it. But he did it already once. It looks good, and I like it. The other thing is, if it doesn't work out very well, or if I end up saying I don't like it once I actually do it, I have another one of these that I can press on, and I'll just leave this as is and have the long flash hider, like SVD like. For the stock, since we're going to be using SVD handguards, we're also going to be using an SVD stock. This is a Black Horse Arsenal adjustable stock, so you can unlatch this, turn this screw in the back, and it'll adjust the length of pull. Now, I am all well aware of Black Horse Arsenal's reputation. Last I heard, they've been taking people's money and not delivering any products. This was a little while ago. I don't know if they're still doing that or not. I don't know. I didn't really research ahead of time for this. I got this second hand off of Gunbroker, so I didn't have to go through Black Horse Arsenal. So I can't recommend you go get one. I don't want anyone to get screwed over, if that's still even the case. Maybe they've cleaned up their act, I don't know. But that's what we're going to be using for this. And then lastly, for the trigger, I'm going to be using an AK ALG. I've never used one of these yet. At first I had planned on using the Red Star Arms adjustable, but this was on sale, so I figured I would give this a go. Plus, I love the trigger bow, the light or the shallower trigger bow on this. I think it gives it a meaner look, and I like how it feels on my finger. Obviously, that wasn't all the parts. We still have lots of little pieces. Things like the rear sight block, which we'll be using a PSL rear sight block. I was originally going to use an M72 rear sight block, but the the diameter was too large for this 1-inch diameter barrel, so it would just slide over and be floppy. But also, using a Yugoslavian pattern rear sight block with a non-Yugo front trunnion, you have compatibility issues once you press this on. It'll slide on and everything, but it'll end up being pressed back like all the way back here by the time you got it done, and so then your top cover doesn't fit right and everything, and it just looks like a mess. So I'm just going to use the PSL one, and that should interact perfectly with the Romanian RPK front trunnion. And so, I mean, that's the big thing with it. Parts wise, I do obviously have a PSL bolt carrier, bolt, and all that. I also have a Yugoslavian, the M96 bolt carrier. I may try seeing how this works in it as well, because it's heavier than the Romanian PSL bolt carrier. As you can see here, this is the Romanian bolt. This is the Romanian carrier for the PSL, and it has these bored out holes right here, these lightning cuts, to make it lighter. And when compared to the M76 bolt carrier, the M76, you can feel the weight difference, even though this one has a piston on the end. You can just tell the difference. And from what I've found just from playing around with it, is that the PSL bolt works perfectly in it. It sits back in the same exact place where it does on the PSL one, comes out, rotates just fine. So this is more just to see what happens and how it is, more than a dead set plan at this point. So yeah, so then other parts are just all the little pieces. I've got a bunch of magazines to try in it. Got a SVD butt pad, even though I tried fitting it on here a little bit earlier, and it is a bear to put on. Didn't really fit right, but yeah, who knows. Alright guys, so we'll get to this.